Welcome to the Mark Cameron Show. We have conversations with people making their mark. We discover how they do it and what the future of their work is. This week my guest is Harry Mulligan. Harry's an addiction and eating disorders practitioner, psychodynamic counsellor and untier of knots. He's also a music journalist who writes for Louder Than War and does interviews for Noisey, the musical counterpart of Vice magazine. This guy inspires me with his passion for recovery. Enjoy the conversation. Here's to the kombucha and the chat. Thanks so much for hanging out and being up for the chat. Tell me about this kombucha that I've got. I'm very interested in
Yes, I think it's made from a root, so it's mildly fermented, but it's a living organism, so it's very good for your digestive tract and all that. And it's a good little tonic during the winter months.
It's very tasty, thank you.
You're welcome.
We're chatting, we're both exploring doing the keto diet at some point in the next little while, and love it. You've had a real interest in nutrition and in the stuff that helps people get better. That seems to be a big part of your life. What's that been about for you?
Well, I think you have to treat people in all their domains. So going back to university, my university days at Bristol, we were the cutting edge stuff was using a biopsychosocial model.
Right.
So you're treating the whole person. You're treating their physicality or physiology, and you're also treating their psychology and their thinking and how they think and what's maladaptive thinking and what's adaptive healthy thinking. You're dealing with their emotions. A lot of people run into trouble navigating their way through life because they don't know how to manage or live with their emotional self. Yeah. And it can cause a lot of problems. Most addiction is about not feeling.
Wow. How does that work? That's really interesting. There's many routes to addiction, but quite often there'll be abuses that are accompanied by very intense emotions, and often a person trying to navigate their way through that, or even trying to just sit with and live with their emotions, will not be able to do that, and they will have a recourse to mood alter, using alcohol, using other substances that are in their environment, cannabis, stronger narcotics, heroin, cocaine, methamphetamine. Prescription medications are a huge problem. So quite often when people get into addictive problems, it's because they're having emotions that they don't like and they would rather not feel them. Yeah, okay. And that's what leads to then masking over. It leads to dependency. So part of what they need within their own coping repertoire to live from day to day is a preferred substance or behaviour that's making it easier for them to live with how they're feeling from day to day. Yeah. Add on top of that, whether or not the person has non-secure attachment from infancy, which is often the foundation for somebody to have addictions or dependencies later on, will be founded on the basis that they have had early relationships where their primary or secondary carers are absent. Right. Emotionally absent because they're addicts themselves as well, or physically absent because they're gone, they're not present, they're in prison, they're elsewhere. So if somebody is the child of an alcoholic or the child of an addict, in their first couple of years of life, in the early attachment years, they'll have a non-secure style of attachment that they'll carry into adulthood, and it will affect all the relationships in the future. How
How long does that take to happen, do you think, in a child? Is everyone a bit screwed, or
I would say
is it longer term?
It's developed by the time they're 5.
Okay.
You know, so we're talking about the primary attachment with the mother mainly.
Yeah.
I'm not dismissing the validity or importance of dads, because dads are very important as well. But mainly the relationship with the mother is key in the early attachment years. There was a guy called John Bowlby who studied primates, and he was able to see that the ones where the mother was absent were less well adaptive and less secure in themselves, and would later develop behavioural problems.
Right.
So the work and the insights we've gained as practitioners were kind of coming out of the work by this guy, John Bowlby, who observed primates. Because they're mammals as well, and they're very close to us.
Yeah.
And how they form attachments with their children. They're mammals, they breastfeed. So it's a minefield, but usually research suggests that people with full-on poly drug misuse addictions will, as a generalization, have early attachment issues.
Right. Wow.
So,
and what were you seeing as the impact of a holistic approach to addiction? What got you interested in seeing that psychosocial approach was more effective with helping people that had attachment
even
issues?
just a review of the literature would suggest that the most holistic whole approach would to look at all aspects of a person. So as I added on at the beginning, I would add spiritual
Nice.
into that, biopsychosocial spiritual.
Yeah.
And that being a key facet that's been neglected. I believe that we don't have a soul, that we are a soul. So we're spiritual beings who also have a body.
Yeah.
Even the early attachment between a mother and a baby is very physical.
Yeah.
It relies and is founded on being in close proximity to each other, where they're able to hold each other.
Yeah.
And there's a nurturing in that that's the very foundation of healthy living as a mammal. And without it, if it's neglected, it can set a person up through their lifespan development from a place of deficit, of lack and of need.
Yeah. My mum, she used to run a charity that was working in Romania and orphanages.
So you
and they would go out. Exactly, they would go out, and the job was go in the place and hold the children. You know, it was physical contact,
absolutely,
responding to the call and the cries, and
so even more recently in the Lancet, I've read an article, a very significant scientific piece about the weight of the brains of child orphans in Romania.
Ooh.
And their brains, when they've been weighed after death, have been significantly lighter than a well-adapted person.
So this is to do with physical brain development?
That's coming during the nurturing years, and it's missed by a lot of these kids because they don't have the time and proximity with their mother, or they may have been separated at a time when they would have been breastfeeding.
Yes.
So they're starting from a place of lack.
Yeah. This is huge.
Yeah.
So what is it that for you has given this, you found meaning in this work and in these purposes? How did you come into that?
So basically, I'm a person who's in recovery myself. I would probably say I have some of those non-secure attachment issues, not as extreme as an orphan, but I'm 9th out of 10 children.
Right.
right? And my younger brother was born a year and a month and 4 days after I was born.
Right.
So there's very little time.
Yeah.
So I would probably say I have those generic non-secure attachment issues, just matter of factly.
Yeah.
And have had to work through some of that stuff in therapy. So I also developed a dependency on substances, including alcohol, cannabis, and later polydrug misuse issues with much stronger narcotics. As well, mostly in Oregon, the United States, where I went to grade school, junior high school, and high school.
Right. So did you move over there?
We immigrated there. My
yeah.
father worked for the Rolls-Royce Aero Division on the west coast in Scotland, and he then ended up working with Boeing Aerospace on the west coast in Portland, Oregon, and was such a highly skilled, needed, essential type of worker that they were happy to bring him and his wife, my mum, and 10 kids out there.
Jet to yourselves for that, eh? Wow. And what was the life like there, which you experienced?
You know what? It's, I had, even though there was 10 of us, and that kind of makes it difficult to devote maybe the required nurturing to every one of us. We always were well turned out and went to the best schools. My dad, I grew up as a Catholic. My father and mother were both virgins when they married, and they went right through life not having known anybody else intimately than each other. So I always went to good private Catholic schools. I went to a good private grade school out there, and then I went to Central Catholic High School in Portland, Oregon. Was expelled when 4 joints came out of my shirt pocket and landed on the desk.
How did they fall out?
I was pulling a history assignment out my shirt pocket, and boom, 4 joints on the desk. And my US history teacher, Mr. Chapman, he was just such a lovely guy. He was so angry marching me down the hall with these 4 joints. And it happened on his watch. And I was sent home expelled that day. Which was a kind of pivotal moment for me.
Where did life go after that?
I went to a public high school, US Grant High School. I continued to smoke pot. I was kicked out of a moving car one day, scoring some pot. And then I started to get involved in the music scene in Portland very heavily. I had been training as a drummer at the Central Catholic High School. I was training in percussion and keyboard percussion, so I was doing like the trap set and marimbas, xylophones, and all that type of keyboard percussion. So I kind of fell in. When I was expelled, I went for a while to the public high school. I didn't like it. I dropped out. Got a job in a restaurant and started to meet people on the music scene through my older brothers, because I had 4 older brothers who were in their 20s, and they were out on the tiles all the time. And so I gradually met everybody in the music community there.
Who was coming through at that time? What was the feel of the music business then?
In Portland, has always been an incredible cohort during my time of music people. So it was pre-grunge then. Class, it would have been like late 70s. And it was pre-grunge, and guys like Robert Cray, black blues guitarist, and then you started to see some of the pre-grunge bands coming through, like the Wipers, who were post-punk pre-grunge. But with this culture that was also the presence of Mexican tar heroin, and there was a subculture of musos using opiates.
Yeah.
And I ended up falling into this.
Aye.
And started because I had my jaw broken, protecting a girl downtown, and had my jaw broke, hit with a little club, and I was prescribed opiate painkillers, and that's how I got into opiates.
Yeah. Were they just too readily available beyond the prescription at that point? Just
they were. If you were involved with some of the music people,
sure.
They were using them. One or two of them were on methadone, things like that. So it was just very easily accessible, and something that I just unfortunately fell into. And by that point, my mother had to take my dad home to Scotland to die, basically. He'd been in a car wreck and he suffered some cognitive issues, and he was showing signs of premature dementia, and so she took him home. So myself and my younger brother we refused to go back, and we were kind of rudderless, with just older brothers normally looking out for us, and kind of fell in, as you hear so many stories about it, fell into that kind of culture. And it's the late 70s, so you've already seen some of that stuff become quite cool in New York, and so it wasn't healthy, really.
Okay.
And the whole grunge scene was kind of founded on it. Kurt Cobain, Courtney Love, Cat Bjorn from Babes in Toyland.
That'll belt round.
Yeah.
So
I fell into that in the 80s, and without gilding the lily or over labouring the point or in any way glamorising it, because that's what I really don't want to do at all, because it wasn't cool. Using those substances at that time in America, it's only a matter of time before you venture into criminality, and that's what happened to me. And I started to get little sentences that grew to bigger sentences, and then ended with me being sentenced to 2 5-year sentences in the penitentiary, and at the end of which I was taken into custody by the federal forces, and convicted of moral turpitude.
And what was that
deported.
like? What was that like for you in that point in your life? Because on the surface of the memory, people's like, oh, Portland, the grunge thing emerging, that's all this phenomenal culture. But what was it like for you when you were in that place?
It's horrible, because really, when you get stuck in that kind of vicious circle, it becomes quite serious. So what started as a musician dabbling with drugs ended up as an addict dabbling with music. So it steals everything from you. It also got more serious because we also concurrently, during the 80s in America, what you started to see happen was that Pablo Escobar was flooding America with narcotics. And it was, in a way, weaponized.
Jeez. How did they do that? Did they
just
flood it over the border, or was it?
It was coming in everywhere.
Right.
It was coming over the border from Mexico and up through Central America.
And did they grow it in the States and Portland and areas as well then?
In Mexico.
Okay.
No, they weren't growing any of like opium poppies or coca leaves in Oregon. No, everything was coming in from South America and Central America. Because a lot of the stuff that was coming up from South America was going right through Central America and then over the Mexican-US border. Thus you're seeing all this stuff about Trump's wall now. So it's been a huge it's been a huge issue in America since the well, before the 80s,
Yeah.
they were also flying it in
Yeah.
from Cuba and places like that, wherever they could land a plane between South America
Yeah.
and North America. It was coming in everywhere.
Yeah.
They were producing so much of it. And it was very high quality. They were seizing heroin that was like 90-something%, and the same with the cocaine, and Pablo Escobar had weaponized these narcotics to damage American society.
So this is, there's been a lot about him recently through you've got the show Narcos, American made Tom Cruise movie, and do you think there was almost like a national agenda behind some of that to damage America? Yeah.
Absolutely.
Wow.
More recently, I also think that we've seen a lot of weaponized legal highs come into Scotland and different places in the planet that have come directly from China. And it's my view that these legal highs, spice, all the stuff that's causing huge mental health issues, and the subjects who are getting access to them, they're weaponized. I don't think I'm being cynical in thinking that. It's very self-evident to me, being a mental health practitioner working in addiction, to look at people in cities in the UK like Manchester on how their homeless populations have exploded and how their mental health has deteriorated, looking at these weaponized legal highs that are prevalent everywhere.
Wow.
I was so overjoyed, I was jumping for joy when Police Scotland banned legal highs and took them out of the shops.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Gosh, so that's the really interesting thing of, if you want to damage a rival society, or if you have a large scale agenda to cause harm to your enemy and profit like crazy out of it, flood them with drugs, yeah? Okay. So you got, there was loads of that going on. There was a point in your life then where it sounded like it sort of just spiraled down. You were...
So when I came home to the UK after being deported in February 5th, 1988, I had a couple of years still using and drinking, anaesthetizing my feelings, essentially, because by that time my dad had died. I hadn't grieved his death. I hadn't grieved anything that I'd lost, because I was anaesthetized with very strong narcotics. And I was also committing petty crime, acquisitive theft in order to get the substances I was addicted to. And then by 1990, the emotions that I was repressing were just coming up. They were. It's like if you can visualize a basketball. If you hold a basketball underwater, eventually your arms are going to get tired. And you can't keep the ball underwater, and then when you let it go, just shoot straight up. And that's what my emotions were like at that point. So I would be out shoplifting in London. Or whatever I was doing, and I'd find myself just bursting into tears. It's the grief and loss just started coming up on its own. Through the grace of God, 2 people who were outreach workers in North London and Camden, seen what I was cycling through every day, and they 12-stepped me into treatment.
So the 12-step was the first start.
Well, they were both members of 12-step fellowships who also worked on the cutting edge, doing outreach work on the streets. And they grabbed me and they helped me wade through all the admin to get into treatment, to get the funding to go into treatment. But it was also at a time where I was absolutely ripe and ready to stop using. And so I ended up going into a place called the St. Joseph's Centre for Addiction, which was in Hazelmere in Surrey. and I had what the Greeks call a metanoia experience.
Okay. What does
So-
metanoia mean?
Metanoia is having a change of heart. It's a bit like Ebenezer Scrooge
Yeah.
on
Yeah.
Christmas Eve, what he cycles through with the three ghosts.
Yeah.
And he has that change of heart metanoia experience during the night.
Yeah.
And come Christmas morning, he's seen the world with new eyes. So I ended up, I was ready to stop.
Aye.
I was sick and tired of being sick and tired.
Aye.
And I went off into treatment. And with the most wonderful practitioners
Yeah.
who helped me
Yeah.
there. But what I would add as a caveat is that these people who were working at this St. Joseph's Centre for Addiction, it's no longer open anymore. The head of treatment was Lindy Kornblum, and she was doing a doctorate at Roehampton on codependency and
Right.
addiction. They knew what they were doing,
Yeah.
and they were employing the most bleeding edge interventions
Wow.
to help people.
What would they do?
They were devising very well thought out treatment plans. You were doing a lot of the emotional labour work in one-to-ones with your therapist.
Yeah.
And they were also facilitating group therapy in such a way that it was excellent for the people in treatment. It was full of love and care and sensitivity.
Yeah.
And they also used a family systemic approach.
Okay.
So they're looking at the whole family as an organism.
Right.
Quite often when there's an addict in the family or more than one addict, they can quite often be scapegoated, the black sheep. So they were looking at the whole family system.
Wow. A lot of was it Virginia Satir pioneered a lot of that work?
Who?
Virginia Satir.
I'm not sure. I haven't heard
A lot of work in the families. Right.
Okay.
Right.
All right.
And what was it like then? So to be in that place where you have people who are totally devoted to your best well-being, and you are experiencing some kind of transformative time where you've decided to pull your life together and to take a load of responsibility for changing and making a difference. What was that like being in there?
It was hard hitting. It really impacted on me enormously. It was at that time in my 18 weeks or so that I was there that I made a decision to go into education.
Yeah.
And read psychology at least. So I went off to a secondary care place up in the Cotswolds, which was beautiful as well,
Yeah.
I mean, I went to Stroud and spent the next year there, did an access course to social sciences and applied to read psychology and sociology at Bristol.
Oh, wow.
Which is a red brick Russell Group University. So that joint honours degree, there was about 3,000 applicants for 6 places, and tutors at Stroud College were like, "You've got high hopes," sort of thing. But I had a funny experience. I went up to Bristol on one of my days off and spoke to one of the admissions tutors, just to kind of touch bases with them. In fact, I talked to the admissions tutor from sociology, Dr. Steve Fenton, and the admissions tutor from psychology, Dr. Jan Mandela, who was a statistician. So to kind of ask them to look out for my UCAS form.
Yeah.
Being manipulative. want to cover every base. And, so I got called up for an interview, and I had an interview with Dr. Fenton, the sociology lecturer. And I've walked into his office, and I'm looking around at the stuff on the walls, and it's Save the Miners, and so I had kind of some inferential basis of kind of about him. So he's asked me to talk about a subject relevant to sociology, and so I talked about the NHS being the ornament of society in Britain, and that part of the interview went really well. And then I went to see Dr. Mandela. Dr. Mandela was different, so I started speaking to him. The first thing that he asked me was, I see on your UCAS statement that you're a recovering alcoholic. And I said, yeah, that's correct. He says, and then he started crying in the interview. And he says, I'm drinking about a bottle of vodka every morning. And I'm really not having a good time. How did you stop?
Wow.
So I started talking to him about Alcoholics Anonymous and meetings and the 12-step program. And then he came in at the end and he says, well, you know, that's all for now. Don't call us, we'll call you. You'll look out for a letter from UCAS in due course, and I got dismissed, and I went home to Stroud, and 2 days later, unconditional offers popped through the post.
That's cool. Yeah.
So I've talked to my tutors at Stroud College, and I've got the day off because I wanted to go up and thank them personally.
Nice.
And so I went to Dr. Fenton's first. I kind of developed a rapport with him with the mining, Save the Miners and all that, you know, and I liked him. And so I went to him and I said, you know, I just wanted to come up and thank you. You don't know how much this means to me, especially with as many applicants as there were.
Yeah.
And he says, no, you were offered a place on your own merit.
Brilliant.
You know, and,
Yeah.
And then I said at the end, well, I'm going to go see Dr. Mandela and thank him, and before I head back.
Sure.
And he's got up from his desk and grabbed his coat, started putting it on, says, let's go for a coffee, I need to talk to you.
Oh, okay.
We got to the staff canteen, we sat down, and he says, after your interview finished, Dr. Mandela came to see me and said he was going off to an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting.
Wow.
And he died at the meeting.
Oh my gosh.
He died at the AA meeting. And this, you could have knocked me down with a feather.
Aye. Oh my gosh.
He said, but before going to that meeting, I've been doing this joint honours school interviews for the past 15 years with Jan Mandela, and he has never, ever agreed to admit a mature student onto that scheme.
Wow.
And as I was processing this in the coming weeks, I realised that this guy had headed off to an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting with the idea that there was hope he could stop. So that was a really crystallised spiritual experience, that's whole
huge.
thing.
That's be huge for you.
And I think since that time, I've wanted to devote my own professional development to taking people's chemical handcuffs off.
Yeah.
And that's probably what I'm very passionate about. In what I do, you know.
Yeah.
So after I finished my degree, the biggest addiction expert, Maverick,
in the UK was a guy called Dr. Robert Lefevre,
Okay.
and he was the founder of Promise, which was probably the biggest, most renowned 12-step treatment centre in the UK.
Wow.
And I'd been watching this guy's videos.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
I slung him an email and I said, I really want to come work for you. And he asked me to come for an interview in South Kensington in his doctor's surgery, because he was like a lively NHS and private
Right, yeah.
consultancy doctor, GP. I came and met with him, and he took me on as a trainee.
Wow.
Addiction counsellor.
Yep.
So I went in and was shadowing him really in all his. Usually they sent their trainees to Nonnington, Kent, where their big treatment centre is, but they have the Promise Counselling Centre and Secondary Care Centres in Kendrick's Mews in South Kensington.
Right.
But I was based there.
And what were you looking for when you're watching someone at that level? What do you look for in their practice and their skill and their insight?
To be honest, I was fascinated by Dr. Lefevre because he was the absolute pinnacle of addiction treatment in Britain. And I found it very peculiar that coming from a medical scientific background as he did, that he had so wholeheartedly embraced the 12 steps and based that as the model for which he was treating patients that came in. My experience at that point with the 12 steps was excellent as well, so I loved the model. But I was also looking at other things that he did. The part that confused me was that he had embraced the 12 steps, yet he was a militaristic atheist.
Right. No belief in a higher power or...
A lot of it comes down to semantics. He's always proclaimed himself to be an atheist. But I think that if you spoke to him now, he has a belief in the group, a great belief in the group. So if you're thinking about power greater than yourself,
Yes.
and I often use this analogy that I got from him actually. If you take one stick and you break it, it's easy to break one stick. But if you take 8 sticks in a group and you try to break a bunch of 8 sticks,
it's not happening.
Nah. So the stick is representative of one individual person. And 8 sticks, it's very visual for me how to demonstrate that a group is a power greater than yourself. If you can't grasp the notion of a loving, caring God.
That's a brilliant, tangible way for people to make sense of that.
It's a very tangible way to get somebody from being secular, existential, non-believing atheist to a place of non-belief that's militaristic in its dogmatism. From there to belief in a power greater than yourself that loves and cares about you, which in a group therapy situation is quite easy to reach. And then from there to belief in a power in the universe that is loving and caring, because those are the only 2 prerequisites in the literature that are required. That you need to find a power greater than yourself, and it needs to be loving and caring.
And not malevolent and...
and dark and...
after you. Wow. Wow. So, yeah, you're in this amazing place studying under the person. How do you take all that experience and launch into your own practices, or you start affecting others in a really positive way?
I
with this?
spent the next couple of years learning the practicalities and mechanics of facilitating groups, which is probably for me the core of my practice is to facilitate group therapy, and I employ different models and schools of thought, and they take time to learn. But also, I'm coming into this clinical setting with a joint honours degree from a top Russell Group university, where I had did developmental psychology for 3 years, because that's where my focus was, rather than a lot of the cognitive stuff. So the early attachment stuff, things like that we spoke about earlier, was the stuff that piqued my interest. But also the developing person from cradle to grave was what I kind of really focused my studies on.
Wow. Okay.
And, developmental psych, because the person's changing and developing. And so academically, as an undergraduate, I'm learning also about individual differences in people, as well as the generic commonalities in people. I think that you need to be able to look at the individual differences in people hugely. When you're constructing a treatment plan. And also, I was by the time I graduated, excuse me, I was very scientific and data driven. Everything needed to be data driven. We got that hammered into us. That if it's not evidence based and it's not data driven, and you can't justify the intervention that you're using, throw it out.
Throw it out. It's not useful. It's not going to work.
That did me a lot of good.
Okay.
I was also able to watch Dr. Robert as he was learning and training in, for example, EMDR, which is eye movement desensitization, and it's an intervention that's used to treat trauma.
Wow.
Right.
How does it work?
It's following the finger of the practitioner, and while you're following the finger, you're speaking to the client and you're debriefing their trauma. As they tell you about the traumatic event, they're following the finger. So this is called EMDR. I watched Robert while he was developing as a practitioner and all these things, because this guy's a science-based guy, and he's a doctor. And these are, at the time, the cutting, bleeding edge interventions for things like trauma. I was also getting a lot of exposure to things that go on for clients physiologically. So if somebody's checking in on a group, I'll be asking them to check in with their body. Right, so I will do a body scan at the beginning of a group therapy session. Body scan is where you're taking people, their eyes are closed, they're focusing on the breathing, inhale, exhale, and then I'm taking them from feeling the soles of their feet on the ground. How do your feet feel? Is there any tingling, any sensations in your feet? And as you exhale, release it, and I'm taking them up the shins, the thighs, buttocks, and the seat. How does the seat feel under your bum,
Yeah.
and all the way up the body to the top of the head.
Well.
So we call that a body scan.
Yeah.
And that's grounding people in their body.
Yeah. Because is there a disassociation from the body?
There is.
Is it often to the mind or?
Often to the mind. So you get people who will use as a means to disengage from their emotions, will go upstairs and be in a cerebral domain.
Yeah.
And people can live in their heads.
Yeah.
I've done it. People can quite easily live in their heads. Some people, if they're dissociative, can leave their body altogether.
Yeah.
And they'll be out the window, away off somewhere.
Yeah. Yeah.
Very easy to do.
Aye.
So quite often, if I'm starting any new kind of activity, I'll start with a breathing meditation and grounding people in their body with a body scan.
Yeah.
To help them be here and now in the present moment.
Yeah. Because there seems to be something about people, whether it's in a group or one-to-one, someone who is present to you in that moment, that is listening, that is for you. There seems to be a healing component to that, or transformative component to that, which is close to inexplicable, it seems.
I would call that synergy.
Right.
So when you have a group of people, I mean, to put it in biblical terms, wherever two of you are gathered in my name, I am there.
Right.
So I believe that when you're working in a group with a number of individuals, and you're doing good work together, that there's an extra member there.
Yeah.
That's unseen, and science of psychology would call that synergy.
Right.
Other people would call it God or a higher power or a higher consciousness. There's lots of secular semantics that you can use to make it palatable to anybody.
Yeah.
But for me, I really fell in love with doing group work because of this unseen member that's there. Because that's where the magic occurs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And how do you become conscious of that unseen member in the space?
Well, I first became conscious of it being present in 12-step meetings.
Yeah.
Alcoholics Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous, Cocaine Anonymous. I became aware of it in those where I had a few like hair standing up moments and was like, oh my God. And you'll hear anecdotally people talk about it from 12-step groups. And Carl Jung talks about it, the Swiss psychologist. But I watched Dr. Robert Lefevre run groups for a couple of years. And this guy, one of the aspects of his group facilitation is he's a psychodramatist. So somebody's talking about, oh, this happened, and he would stop them in their tracks and say, okay, pick somebody to be your mum. Pick somebody to be your sister.
Yeah.
And he'd do this psychodrama.
Oh. So you get them playing out the roles. Yeah.
And then at the end of it, he'd say, okay, Mick, debrief yourself. I'm not Charlotte's brother. Right. So he would debrief them at the end. But quite often, he would do these psychodrama sketches with the person's issue that they were trying to work through. And you'd see it, the person who brought it into the group would see it in a totally different way, and some penny would drop, and it'd be like, eureka!
It's beautiful.
You know, so it's to watch that. So I've always used a lot of psychodrama in my groups.
So, you've had these amazing experiences continually, and you see that. What does it look like for you now? What do you get excited about or really interested about when you sit in a group to think, what tools or ideas are you playing with now, are you exploring?
At the moment,
over the last couple of years, I've been working at a clinic in Zurich in Switzerland. I've also been working at Drug and Alcohol Rehab Asia in Thailand. I was about 10 months there. Then I was in Iran for 5 months with a football club and 3 British and Irish footballers who had problems. And I've had such a fantastic few years that I kind of felt a wee bit guilty about it. And so I've come home and I've made a decision to give a season to the Bethany shelter here in Edinburgh.
Okay.
As a way of giving something back.
Yeah.
I've got a wee daughter, Willow, in Edinburgh, who have made a decision to remain here. I've also got 2 sons in England, James and William. William's 13. I've also he's said to me over the last couple of years, Dad, I'd like you to work closer to home.
Yeah. Wow.
So I've kind of heard that.
Yeah.
Him saying that.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to be much more present for my children.
Yeah.
Including my 24-year-old James.
Yeah.
And I've kind of committed to not going abroad to work. So I don't really know what's going to happen.
Wow.
I would love to get a wing in a prison, be given a wing in a prison to run as a drug-free wing and turn it into a treatment centre. Wow. I'm just putting that out there.
Love it. So if someone's running a wing in a prison, they need to get in touch.
Yeah.
I love that.
I've also put some feelers out.
Okay.
With some people in prison ministry and Prison Scotland and Police Scotland.
Great.
I would love to be able to put a team together to run a drug-free wing.
Wow.
And address some of the issues that are generating mortality and morbidity rates in Scotland that are unacceptable to me. Mm-hmm. The amount of drug deaths due to polydrug misuse in Scotland are totally unacceptable. Yeah. It's the highest in Europe, and it's really unacceptable.
Right.
And I think that we need to do something more.
What would more look like?
Treatment. The biggest, best treatment centre in Scotland is Castlecraig Hospital and Peebles. Castlecraig is the preferred treatment provider for the US military in Europe. All their guys that are traumatised in the Middle East, Afghanistan, Iraq, all go to Castlecraig.
What do they do that's so strong?
All the stuff that's... they'll do the EMDR for trauma and PTSD and things like that. But they have a very good clinical team there. But it's not accessible to Scottish residents or garden variety addicts from Scotland.
Yeah.
So they have a huge population that comes from the Netherlands with government funding. But our Indigenous addicts in Scotland don't have access to Castlecraig because it's too expensive.
Okay.
So we need to make treatment more accessible to just ordinary garden variety drug addicts in Scotland.
Yeah.
And I think it's a shame that they don't get the kind of treatment that they need. Yeah. I would love to be able to make it more accessible.
What would it take? I mean, this is an area I'm not familiar with, but it sounds like
funding.
Yeah.
Or making treatment more accessible by training up practitioners to run units.
Yeah.
More units.
Yeah.
That don't cost £12,000 a week.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, so we need treatment units
where people are getting access to treatment and we're maybe training up teams and de-skilling the work
Yeah.
to a degree to make it easier to train them up. And license, making it easier for us to license them as practitioners to work. Quite often an issue is that the best practitioners are recovering addicts themselves.
Yeah. Okay.
So it's quite often they come with police records, criminal records. So making it easier for them to be admitted on to PVG groups protecting vulnerable adults and vulnerable kids.
Yeah.
So making it a little easier for them to access those if they have criminal pasts.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. And in the future of treatment and recovery, it seems to me that there are more things available for people to get addicted to quicker. So say like social media, your phone, this is something, like dopamine hits from all that. So what's coming in the future with this stuff? What do we need to get ready for?
The future's here. If you're training as an addiction practitioner, you will be trained in substance addictions and process addictions.
Right. So what's a process addiction?
So a process addiction is where the person is, like you've just described, getting a dopamine, serotonin hit from activities.
Wow.
I'll start with a definition. My definition of addiction is a pathological relationship with a mood-altering substance or experience that has life-threatening consequences.
Wow. Right. Okay. Yep.
Right?
Yep.
So the most obvious ones would be alcohol and substances. Actually, alcohol's the worst.
Yeah.
Because it has the most damaging, destructive effect on the person's physiology and the brain, the mind. It's by far head and shoulders above any other substance.
Yeah.
So you've got alcohol that I put probably at the top of the list, especially in Scotland, because it's such a cultural thing to drink.
Yeah.
I've heard people say, I don't trust people that don't drink. That's how much of a issue it is here.
That's right.
But then you have substances. However, the highest suicide rates come as a result of sex addiction. Sex addiction.
What? Right.
Sex addiction, real sex addiction, is devastating on the person, leaves them in such despair that they have the highest incidence of suicide.
Oh.
So that's the first process addiction. And it could be a sex addiction where they never even meet another person.
Right.
So it can be porn.
Yeah.
You're talking about porn. That will just... They're not engaging with the present here and now if they're lost in that world. Yeah. Prostitutes. It's huge. So many apps for dating and all that. The whole domain has blown up in the digital world and become a beast on its own, a beast in its own right.
Yeah.
Gambling. It's probably the hardest to treat.
Okay.
Right.
Why's that, do you think?
It's so insidious. It's insidious. It's legal. It's been really, really targeted because of the digital realm as well. Yeah. So I've worked recently with a gambler, and I've looked at their invoice for the money that they've spent with the gambling app, and it's been like that in one day. Yeah. 500, 500, 500, 500, 500, 500. bets
Yeah. On a phone.
on a phone without even going out the house or wherever they are.
Jeez, that's huge.
Right, so the level of destruction on the family, the mind boggles.
Yeah.
It can, and it is, unless they get treatment, it's so hard to stop.
Yeah.
And that's purely getting a hit,
Yeah. Wow. So
adrenaline and
is there ways that as society you think we are getting better at dealing with this, whether that's not just getting people into treatment, but is there ways that we're dealing with addictive processes and substances? Are we treating them as powerfully as we should, or
no.
like how do we actually get
No.
better at managing these?
I think that the ethics, this is an ethical minefield. A number of years ago, I wrote an article after Tea in the Park,
Yeah.
2015, 2016.
I think I was there one of those
I
years.
think it was the last. Well, it was the last
Uh-huh.
one.
Yeah.
And I wrote an article and I highlighted the lack of ethics in the collusive relationship between DF concerts and an alcohol sponsor. After a young lad had attempted to inject himself in a portaloo and bled out in the portaloo and died. I got a bee in my bonnet about the relationship between the promoter
Uh-huh.
and an alcohol sponsor. The ethics are all wrong.
Right.
And I believe DF Concerts, who promote that festival, ended it that year.
Do you think it was off the basis of some of these incidents that were on the
Well,
rise?
I do believe, because I spoke directly with people at DF Concerts that I know,
Wow.
and I said, you need to end this relationship with an alcohol sponsor.
Right.
At the moment, I'm ready to write to some people
Yeah.
at football clubs for carrying gambling sponsors on their shirts.
Right. Yeah.
So Celtic Football Club have Daffabet
Yeah.
and Magners on the back. I think it's time that we started to challenge these clubs for having both alcohol and gambling sponsors on their shirts.
Is that? I mean, is the reason that there's power not just because they see it everywhere, but it's placed on quite strong archetypal figures that these people admire, that they love, that they look up to, and is that how it begins to get kind of insidious in their
Of
brain?
course,
And,
it's normalised.
Okay.
But interestingly and ironically, some of the people I've treated have been some of these players that have wore
Yeah. Yeah.
those jerseys with
There's a
those
whole culture around it.
sponsors.
Yeah.
And I think as the clubs have to deal with managing players with these very
Yeah.
insidious, family damaging addictions like gambling, hopefully they'll sit up and take notice and take their own inventory and stop that practice, because it is unethical.
Yeah.
There's no question about it.
So with it's similar in music in some ways. There's a glorification and normalization of substance abuse and misuse. Why are the industries or those most responsible for managing the assets, to put it crassly, whether it's the players, the band, why are they not promoting health within these industries and giving people a holistic view of their life to keep them moving well, to keep them making better decisions for the bodies that will extend their careers and their playing life and their family life?
So the biggest initiative over the last couple of years that I'd love to give some airplay to at this moment is an organisation in England called Music Support. Music Support started because performers in the industry
Yeah.
who are in recovery process themselves
Yeah.
have generated enough interest to have something like this set up. So music support are now doing the backstage areas at all the main festivals in England, and are in the process of coming to Scotland, being brought up to Scotland.
Transmit or
For all the major
Oh, wow.
festivals in Scotland as well, where they're setting up a safe area for performers, road crew, techs, lightmen, all of them come where they can get the support that they need not to use or drink or whatever the problematic behaviour is that they're being triggered to act out on. And it's a huge initiative.
That's brilliant.
There are so many key performers, without blowing their anonymity, who are in recovery now in the UK. It's huge. The Libertines, it's in the public domain, so I don't mind talking about it. Peter went to treatment in Thailand, and they recorded anthems of doomed youth at Karma Sound in Thailand. And Chris Craker has been a huge influence in Thailand. He's an ex-Sony CEO who owns Karma Sound in Thailand. And Peter was in treatment right next to there, and so there's a lot that's happening, and it's almost reaching critical mass within the industry where the stigma's been removed about going into treatment. And
these you know, a lot of the experiences that come from people who are perhaps going through treatment are, you know, they're facing down some of the things that they have carved off themselves, that they find deplorable in themselves. Like, they're actually having the courage to look some of that down and include their, you know, their worst self back in. And there's something surely phenomenal about the kind of art that can be created by people who are willing to take on, you know, the shadow that's in them, as Jung would unpack it. And that must be exciting for what's possible now.
Oh, don't get me started. The whole issue for me about alchemy and alchemizing some of that dark content, the Jungian shadow stuff, is huge. My brother John wrote a book called Shopping Cart Soldiers that's taught in American universities about his serving in Vietnam with the US Air Force, which he was drafted to go when we moved there the first time. He was drafted off to Vietnam, suffered PTSD in Vietnam, brought it back stateside when he came out of Vietnam, had horrendous years medicating it with alcohol, got sober and wrote a book called Shopping Cart Soldiers, which is really about the catharsis of alchemizing those dark experiences into art and literature and songs. And this is such a deep vein to mine in the creative world. Anthems of Doomed Youth was the album that the Libertines wrote, composed and recorded when Peter Doherty was getting clean and sober at Hope House in Thailand. And it's, if you listen to some of the songs, some of the compositions on that album, it's his best work. But you could go on ad infinitum. The Primal Scream albums where Bobby Gillespie's alchemizing some of that stuff as well, and using it as a cathartic outlet for getting clean, or you know.
This is where art seems to source. If you're taking it back, this is where the things that connect with people on a far deeper level, on a much
Yes.
broader level, all
Yes.
sits in that space. So
Yeah.
how, I mean, you must see it. How do people start alchemizing it, and how did they go through that process?
I think
no
that we need to start. We need to start putting on living workshop stroke camps for songwriting, for people who have had, for performers and artists who have had addictive issues that they've resolved,
Right.
or partly resolved,
Yeah.
or
Face
because
to-
it's a huge vein of. I mean, alchemy is about turning ordinary stuff into gold.
Yes.
So that's why it's my favourite word to describe it,
Yeah.
because you're taking just your emotional bedrock experiences and you're doing something that's just incredible.
Yeah, yeah. That's one of the most. I mean, as you say, that's the magic in that group of those in recovery, that something starts to change, and it's the intangible sense that there's another presence here, or there's something else happening,
Something else here.
and there's change happening, where people who take the darkest of human experience
Yeah.
and they start to mine it, and they find gold in there,
Yeah.
and they share that. And
Yeah. The Charles Bukowskis of the world.
right, who's Charles Bukowski?
Charles Bukowski is an American literary figure who was down and out alcoholic and has written some of the best books out there
Wow.
about being a down and out drunk.
Yeah.
And he's pretty much a cult figure in the literary world now, and I would really suggest that you read some of his books.
Okay.
Because if you've not read any Charles Bukowski, you're in for a treat, for
Right.
sure.
Right. Wow. Just thinking through, what is there places that you would just recommend people to look into, as just kind of wrapping this up? Where would you recommend people check out for the most brilliant work in this stuff? Where could people connect with what you're doing or what you're passionate about?
Well, there's Promise in London, where I trained.
Yeah.
There's Castle Craig. I did research there and did 3 other establishments when I was an undergraduate. They were part of I was doing outcomes research. Castle Craig is the preferred treatment provider for the US military in Europe. The work they do is outstanding. Hope House in Thailand, Dara, Drug and Alcohol Rehab Asia in Thailand, Jericho House in Glasgow, Bethany House here in Edinburgh. The work is happening everywhere.
Yeah.
Wow.
It was really courageous, just some of the stuff that you were chatting about, how you've moved through it and drawn from it, put it into alchemy yourself. So I appreciate that.
I would say, I first got clean and sober in 1991. That wasn't the end of the story. I've had 3 relapses that were painful, difficult things, but Christ fell with his cross 3 times, so I don't give myself a hard time. I'm just grateful that I've been able to come back from them stronger, more aware, better equipped. Addiction's a syndrome or disease. I don't think it is a disease, but it's a syndrome that involves relapse. It's a reality. And I think it's a very high expectation to expect people to get it first time. It's just unrealistic. It does happen. But our awareness and knowledge and interventions to treat it are getting better every day.
Well, here's to where it will go. And,
Absolutely, Mark.
Harry, thanks so much for
very
the
much.
conversation.
Absolutely. You're welcome.
Well, I left that conversation with Harry feeling inspired and hopeful about what he's doing. Thank you for checking out the conversation. If you're enjoying the show, please give it a like, subscribe, share, review it, let people know about what we're up to here. It's a privilege to be doing this. We recorded this in Edinburgh, Scotland. Sam Gallagher helped get the music together, and the images are by Melody Joyco. Thanks.